crushed by the log. Let's talk about a specific kind of bad timing, the sort that feels less like chance and more like a cruel, pre-written joke from the universe. For a mother and daughter named Farida and Shireen Manji, that punchline was waiting on a Canadian highway in November 2004. They were heading east in their Pontiac Sunfire, maybe just 10 minutes from home, cruising at 100 kilometers an hour. Then the road curved, the trees closed in, and their view ahead vanished. That's when dumb physics took over. Coming the other way were two logging trucks, stacked high and heavy with cedar logs. Too heavy, as it turned out. The first truck hit a downhill curve and started to tip, grinding along the center divider for 100 meters before one of its logs broke loose. A 40-foot cedar log, heavier than a pickup truck, cartwheeled over the barrier and slammed into the Manji's sedan dead on. The log hit the driver's side A-pillar, tearing through steel and bone in the same instant. The roof folded into the cabin, smashing Farida's head down against her chest with a sickening, wet crack. The force was so violent it shattered her skull, pulping her brain the instant the car crumpled around her. The windshield burst into a storm of glass. Shards sprayed the cabin. Then the log ripped across the seats, chewing both passengers to pieces and leaving a slick trail of blood and meat where laughter had been seconds before. The seatbelt held Shireen upright, which only made it worse, pinning her in place, only to have her upper body crushed against the buckle. Both women were gone in seconds, their bodies compacted into a cabin now half its original height. When first responders arrived, the log rested diagonally across the completely flattened wreck. The ultimate irony was the later acquittal of the truck driver, which meant there was no villain in this story. So yeah, fellas, just be cautious when you drive, because the road doesn't care how close to home you are. So that was the highway. Now let's get back to the woods, where the killer looks a little different. Decapitated by the chainsaw. Honestly, digging into this chapter scared the shit out of me. Have you ever seen a snake snap when you hold it by the tail? That lashing, that unpredictable strike, still gives you chills, right? That's exactly what a chainsaw kickback is like. So here we are, talking about the kind of mistake you only get to make once. This one involves a 33-year-old tree faller we'll call Mr. John, a guy with 15 years of experience who probably thought he'd seen it all. His final job was a 40-foot pine, and his tool was a chainsaw with a vicious reputation for kickback. Think back to that snake we talked about. The tree was already on the ground and he was in rhythm, slicing through the limbs. The saw ran smooth, chewing through wood without a complaint. Then he found what loggers call a spring pole. It's a limb bent under insane tension, pinned by the weight of the trunk, holding an immense load of energy like a coiled spring ready to whip loose. The moment the spinning chain bit into that compressed wood, the entire limb exploded. All that stored energy unleashed at once, and the saw kicked back hard. The screaming chain launched straight for his body in less than 1/10 of a second, moving faster than any human reflex could match. It struck him directly in the throat with a metallic whine. The chain teeth ripped his neck wide open, shredding flesh and severing everything vital inside, including the arteries and veins. A massive spurt instantly painted the felled log and the ground around him. His windpipe was cut open, choking off his airway. He would have released the saw and clutched himself instinctively, but the damage was absolute. He dropped in a bloody heap, air hissing wet until it went quiet, lying in the woods, just feet from the very tree that killed him. That's how it goes, man. 15 years in the woods, and what gets him? A pissed-off branch and a saw with a serious grudge. Guillotined by a pine. Here's one where the woods set up their own domino game. Knock the first piece, and you can only stand there while the rest come down. That's how a 53-year-old faller got pulverized in South Carolina, October 1992. The guys in the trade have a name for trees waiting to kill you, widowmakers. Tells you everything, doesn't it? Our guy, let's call him Leo, had just cut down a 70-foot yellow pine. But the tree didn't fall clean, it got stuck, leaning at a nasty angle against another pine standing about 15 feet away. So now he's staring up at a monster of a problem, suspended in the air. And his solution was to play lumberjack Jenga by cutting down the very tree holding the first one up. He positioned himself right at the base of that support tree and got to work with his chainsaw. What he didn't account for was the vibration. The second the chainsaw bit into the trunk, it sent shockwaves up the tree. That was all it took. The lodge tree above him shifted, broke free, and started sliding down the trunk of the second tree, as sudden and final as a greased guillotine blade. That whole timber mass weighed about 30,000 pounds, comparable to a fully loaded fire engine. Leo was bent over, focused on his cut, with zero time to even look up. The blow split his head open, spraying shards of bone and brain juice all through the sawdust. And then you could hear it. His spine let out this wet pop as that mighty log drove him straight into the ground. Almost in the same instant, it sliced his legs at the thigh, turning muscle and marrow into sludge. His crew came running, only to find him mutilated, with some of them so shaken they couldn't even look at the body. Sometimes, man, that's how it is. You watch the inevitable, but there's no stopping it. Our guy, too, was right there when the dominoes fell, caught dead in the middle. So, nature had its turn. Now let's see what happens when a skidder gets its shot. Mauled under the skidder. It was a normal morning in the woods of South Carolina, April 1993. A logging crew was out clearing hardwoods. Just 4 guys, a tree cutter, a skidder operator, a loader operator, and a truck driver. The skidder operator was just 28 years old, running an old timberjack from the late 70s. It was a beast of a machine. Monstrous rubber tires, and an open cab that had no seatbelt. Around 8 a.m., he dumped a load of logs and swung the machine around near an idle loader, and that's when everything went wrong. On the ground were 2 leftover logs, one about 6 inches thick, the other 14. The skidder's back tires rolled over them like speed bumps, but this wasn't some little bump in the road. The hit kicked loose a violent force, and suddenly the machine became a bull in rage, trying to smash its rider into the ground. Since he wasn't strapped in, that jolt was all it took and threw him clean out of the seat. Maybe he slipped or maybe he jumped, I can't say. But what's clear is that he landed in the single worst place possible, directly in the path of his own machine's oversized tires. The skidder, now driverless, kept creeping forward. In a flash, one of the rear tires climbed right over him, compressing him straight through. Skin flayed apart in webbed patterns, organs gushed out in waves, until the body was barely recognizable. The tire plowed over him, splitting the bridge of his nose and forcing his eyes from their sockets as his teeth tore through his cheek. Beneath the weight, his bones broke in grim succession, forcing his insides to spill out in a slow, wet mess. It's a brutal way to die, but I really hope none of us ever has to see something like that. The loader operator saw the machine drifting forward on its own. He ran over, shut it down, and that's when he saw his buddy mangled on the ground, torn into wreckage. So getting flattened is bad, but getting fed to a machine is pure hell. Let's see how. Shredded by the woodchipper. Here we have a predator that doesn't hunt in the woods but waits in the open, patient as hell until somebody screws up. That's a woodchipper. It was just past noon on October 11th, 2022. 2 climbers were trimming a tree 55 feet up, while Jesus Salvadore worked below, feeding the chipper's open mouth. It looked like another day's work, but it was about to flip into a nightmare. Now here's this final detail. A chipper doesn't chew on its own, it has to be fed. The rollers bite down, pulling branches into a drum of blades with an unstoppable force. And yeah, human strength is a joke to it. But you're probably thinking, come on, how bad can a chipper be? Watch this. So Salvadore fed a branch, but his glove snagged. In a fraction of a second, the roller grabbed it and yanked his left arm in. Reflex made him dive forward, trying to rip free, but the chipper just pulled harder. The machine swallowed his arm whole, jerking the shoulder loose and ravaged the ligaments. In a single wrench, skin started shearing from his hand and effectively degloved. There was a hard clack when his bones met the rollers. A short, punched-out grunt was forced from his lungs once his chest was dragged onto the tray while ribs fractured against hard, rough wood and steel. The momentum pulled his head and shoulders forward into the jaws of the machine, the knife drum spinning at full speed, ready to tear apart whatever came next. Knives sliced fabric and skin first, and then they dug deeper, straight into the neck and chest, destroying the heart and lungs. The engine's note dipped slightly as the drum bit into a new, dense load. The other crew member, hearing the change in the machine's sound, finally hit the stop button. But by then, it was only a cleanup operation. The chipper had already been fed. Those are the woods and the brutal deaths they bring. One mistake and you're meat. Stay sharp and stay alive.